All right, Taylor, thank you so much for joining us again. How can seventh graders get involved to help the species?
There's a couple of different ways. So one of the biggest things is just raising awareness. Not a lot of people know about the red wolf. So if you are involved in a project that involves conservation and you want to pick red wolves as your species, absolutely go ahead and do that, because I feel like just general raising awareness will do a lot. Another thing you can do is fundraising. You can fundraise to support different programs that go back and help the red wolf population. So there's the Red Wolf Coalition. You can donate to a zoo directly that supports the red wolves. You can simply just go and visit your zoo that has red wolves. Yeah, it's just something as simple as that will help out tremendously.
And where do they reintroduce red wolves?
So it's like a two-part thing. So it is my understanding that so when red wolves come from a setting like a zoo and they want to transition them into the wild, it is a multi-step process. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that these guys can sustain themselves and the population before you release them into the wild. So you want to, what I believe they do is there's a barrier island where they heavily monitor the wolves independently. So they're completely by themselves. So there's a barrier island that is heavily monitored by U.S. Fish and Wildlife, where they make sure these wolves are hunting and taking care of themselves and able to sustain themselves without like keeper interference. And then from there they get radio collared and moved to an area in North Carolina where the wild population is currently.
Now, I know you had touched on this a little bit earlier in one of your previous answers, but what type of testing, or do they test on wild wolves to see, what their genetics are made out of and if they've crossbred with coyotes?
Right. So if a wolf is captured, there's some different blood work and stuff that can be done to see if they have or how much coyote, or what that not inbreeding coefficient. So there's testing that can be done that will determine what percentage of that wolf DNA is coyote DNA, and that percentage, from what I understand right now, can be anywhere from like 3% to 80% higher. And from what I've read, there's always some percentage of coyote DNA in the wolf population. And that's not just red wolves, that's all wolves in North America. So that includes the gray wolf as well.
What other facts or information is important to know about red wolves, such as their traits, habitat, maybe distinctive coloration?
Right. So red wolves are native to the southeast United States. So they range from like North Carolina all the way over through Texas. And at one point that population went through that entire range. So a lot of things you'll see in the red wolf is similar to what like the trees and things in those areas are. So red wolves are like a red, gray, black in color. And if you look around, we are in South Georgia right now. So we have a lot of pine trees and a lot of oak trees, which give off that gray and black and brown coloration, which helps with the wolves' camouflage, which is one of the reasons why when people come and look at our wolf exhibit, they're like, we don't see the wolves. And that's just because they are so good at blending in with their environment. Way here is being a little nosy, but you can see more of the gray colors in her. She does have some red and stuff around her ears. But another thing would be wolves don't want anything to do with people for the most part. They want to stay away from us. So this whole like big bad wolf thing typically doesn't apply unless you're engaging with that wolf directly. We go into these exhibits and the wolves tend to stay away from us. There's very minimal contact we have between them. They don't really want to engage. They're pretty elusive.
So I know in most of the other exhibits here at Cheehaw, we have a tendency to see enrichment.
Mm-hmm.
Is that why there is no enrichment, or is it just a very natural looking enrichment in the exhibit?
Right. So with our wolves, we want to keep it as natural as possible. So they get a lot of scent enrichment. So we use hunting lures, we use pine cones, I like to take like logs and things from other exhibits. So like our cheetahs really love to climb on logs, and after those logs have worn down a bit and they smell a lot like cheetah, I'll bring them over here to the wolves, and they can come and they can smell and get that stimulation that way. We also give them different prey items, so they get deer, squirrel. We've even given them like geese, like the wings of geese that have been culled, and they absolutely love it. Rats are another big one, fish. So any of those really naturalistic prey items are really good for these wolves, especially if they are going to be reintroduced. We want them to be able to know what they're hunting for, you know. So really naturalistic stuff is good for them.
Thank you. So I know that you mentioned that you're very hands-off with the animal. Does that mean that you don't groom them or that you don't do anything like that with them?
Right. We don't do, there's no petting. There is no training program. We don't, so like with our cheetahs and a lot of our other animals, we do get hands-on with vaccinations and blood draws and things like that. And we'll go through, which we do vaccinate and do blood draws and things and whatnot with these guys, but we don't train them to come up to us to voluntarily present their arms or things like that, because if they get released, we don't want them to be so comfortable that they're walking up to people. We don't want them wandering into people's yards, and that just really helps with their safety and with the safety of people, because if they do get spooked and you do have your hands on them, they do have a very powerful bite, and we just are minimalizing that chance of injury between people and animals.
You had talked about the red wolf population, the wild population, a little bit early on, and can you repeat those statistics to us again?
Right. So the wild population of red wolves as of right now is definitely less than 30. I want to say it's less than 20.
And why do you think it's important to preserve this species?
That's a good question. So I feel like every species plays a role in its environment. This has been seen most notably with the gray wolf reintroduction, which was actually based on the red wolf reintroduction. But when they reintroduced these wolves back in Yellowstone, it completely changed the environment. The waterways opened up. Plants started to regrow that hadn't been there before because the prey species had died down, because that's what the wolves prey upon. It can completely change your ecosystem. It's also the only wolf that is only found in North America, which I think is really cool.
That is very cool. So, unfortunately, these animals don't live for forever. And so, what would you do with a dead red wolf when you come across one?
Right. So, if one of our wolves passed, we would call the vet. We'd have a necropsy done to figure out that cause of death, see if it's of natural causes or if it's something that we could prevent in the future. We also will, if there are studies being done, because there's not a lot that we know about the species and we're always willing to learn more. We will take tissue samples and send them to different scientists to continue their studies, and just so that we can learn as much as we can.
That's really awesome. Well, Taylor, thank you so much for all that you do for Cheehaw and for the red wolf species, and thank you for taking the time to interview and answer some of these questions for me.
Yeah, no problem.